Welcome to Aquarian Diary, where we discuss issues around the emerging age of Aquarius. I'm your host, John Irving. Thank you for joining me. Greetings all, it is May 13th, 2022. I'm coming on here because I read something quite alarming today that I think I have a somewhat unique perspective on, because I was the CTO, CEO, and founder of a tech company in the social media space, and this is before Facebook. So I have kind of an understanding of what that is like and what it involves, and I can offer that perspective to you. And I'm not sure that your average person is going to really understand what all of the implications of this are and how serious it is. Now, of course, the whole world, where anybody who's been paying attention to the news lately knows about the whole Roe v. Wade issue. And there are tremendous amounts of concern around whether or not that will be the end of Roe v. Wade and access to birth control or even contraception, depending on how far they go with it. And I suspect they'll try and go as far as they can. And that alone is very alarming and should be very disconcerting. I also recently read a piece in The Guardian about how the U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement, ICE, has built a vast surveillance network similar to what the NSA has, and which has incredible capabilities to monitor many levels of communication of all Americans. That was also alarming. I'll put some graphics on the screen if you're watching this on YouTube, and also links in the description to these articles. There have been more reports about the threat to American democracy and concerns about an actual civil war in the United States, although it may not be fought militarily as the first American Civil War was. There does seem to be warfare occurring across ideological divides, coming from, reputable sources, these concerns. And piecing all of this together, it certainly looks that way. Now, of course, I did episodes on the USA Pluto Return, which again, I argue, just based on the evidence of what's occurring now, it's pretty much irrefutable empirically that the Pluto return is occurring now, although it's just beginning. And many other notable and prominent astrologers also use this Sibley chart. Again, if you simply observe what's happening in the United States with any degree of objectivity, it's completely unprecedented in modern history. It's unhinged. It's on the verge of not being a democracy. And when I read reports, I often honestly think that this sounds like a failed or failing state. So it's extremely dramatic, like off the charts dramatic, which is what you would expect with a Pluto return occurring now. The main thing I want to talk about today, and first of all, let me also say this. I spent over a week moving stuff and just pushed myself way too hard. I had COVID this winter, and I have to be very careful about physically overtaxing myself because it can take me a long time to recover. And I was moving tons of stuff for like over a week. And then it's been a week now. I have just not had the energy to do anything. And I'm just starting to regain my energy now. And so here I am. Let me also say this. In my meditation practice yesterday, I just want to share an experience I had quickly before I talk about what's going on that is of great concern to me in addition to these other things. I had a very interesting experience. This has come up for me a couple times. Strong chills here. So what has come to me on a few occasions because I've been listening to things while I've been doing all this work. Um, and whenever the subject of Gaia comes up and Gaia being in trouble, um, oh, I get very strong energies here. Um, I get this strong sense that this is true, that we need to act and do something about this. And yet, we're being confronted with the onslaught of insanity, basically. It's nihilism, it's destructive energy. It's people who are in deep resistance to these changes that are occurring right now, and they don't know how to respond because to them it's very foreign and very upsetting, and it's destabilizing from their perspective. And even though the past sucked in a lot of ways for many people, there are a lot of people who just cling to and long for the familiar. And so they're having a very reactionary response to all of these energies that are occurring right now. And so they're lashing out in really weird and crazy ways. Oh, so what I was going to say is that in my meditation last night, I was not feeling a lot of energy until I decided to send energy out into this area that I'm in right now, which is different from where I was before, because I had sensed that this area kind of had a bit of a depressed energy about it. And when I did that, I felt a tremendous amount of energy come through me and go out into this area. And when I'm speaking area, it's a large area, it's a county. So I'm putting that out there because I think if in your own practice, if you can try and ground light and positive energy and bring it out into the earth right now, it's very much needed. So that's one thing that I get this reinforcement intuitively that the earth, like we're really going through a difficult period right now, and we're right between eclipses. We had a solar eclipse in Taurus on April 30th, and we're having a lunar eclipse in Scorpio on May 16th. Now, eclipses in some ways are kind of like portals. And so the energies are extremely intense, and it can cut both ways. This axis of Scorpio and Taurus, though, in particular Scorpio in its lower expression, can be one of the sort of darkest areas of the zodiac. Its contemporary ruler is Pluto, and its ancient ruler is Mars, and both of these in a negative expression can go quite dark. And so I think that what I've been sensing and feeling, and it's kind of almost overwhelming, is that there's a shitload of dark energy. And I would go even so far. I mean, I'm not one of those people who thinks that everything is love and light here. I think that there's a lot of dark energies who do not want Earth to evolve or to ascend. And we're seeing that play out in the world. And they can be very, very slippery. Like they can be hard to, because they're not, the ones that we should be really concerned about are not dumb. They're smart. So they work in very subtle ways. One of the other symptoms of long COVID is brain fog. And I do lately, I don't have the recall of my vocabulary, and sometimes I forget things and stuff. It's just weird. I'm hoping that passes, but I'm not as sharp as I would normally be. However, so this axis of these eclipses is the way I see it is that there's a war going on. And I think that if we look at what, say, for example, the GOP or the Republicans in the United States are doing now, I don't think we should take anything for granted. There seems to be sort of a relentless attack, it's even coming from the Supreme Court now, against progress. And that is the last thing we need right now. The fact is that based on our environmental situation, climate change and everything, we literally have to change or we are going to face devastation down the road. We don't have a choice. So the status quo, or staying, going back to some mythical past, is like the last thing we should do, because that would just lead to our destruction, basically, the destruction of civilization. So, those of us who are aligned with progress and want equality and justice and fairness, and whether it's economic or social or whatever, we are aligned with the right side of history. But there's a large force and significant force who are willing to engage in underhanded tactics and engage in lies and deceit and deception and who knows what else, who do not want that to occur because they prefer the status quo, even if it will destroy us. So I see, if we look at all the things that are happening, there is definitely a pattern to undermine, and in particular, America. And that's almost, even people who were sort of brain fog again, even people who were sort of more centrists are alarmed at things that are happening now. So we have to be engaged, and we have to do everything we can, strong chills here, to mitigate this, to help get us over and through this period, because there are a lot of forces against us and who do not want this to occur. And yes, this is a free will zone, so it's up to us. We can't solely rely on spirit intervening or protecting us. And anyone who argues that this isn't darkness, I have a serious issue with that whole sentiment, because if we look at what's happening and the implications of it, the amount of suffering that will result and oppression. I mean, look at what's happening in Ukraine, what Putin is doing. Is that what people want to have? Is that the kind of leadership that you want in the United States? I think not. Come on, let's get real. That is a distinct possibility under certain scenarios, because that's what they want. They don't want true democracy. They want authoritarianism. And you look at what these authoritarian leaders are doing. So the issue that got me here right now, and I kind of dropped everything I was doing and set up my recording stuff and everything very quickly, wasn't anticipating doing this today, is this Texas bill called HB 20, which would basically force social media companies and online platforms with significant audiences, I think it's over 50 million unique visitors a month, to not censor their platforms. Okay, so you think, okay, big deal. Maybe they shouldn't be censoring people. Well, if you want to go back to like some kind of crazy Wild West where there's no limits on spammers or people who harass or threaten or bully or intimidate others or whatever, get rid of all the algorithms. Don't get me wrong. I'm not a fan of the status quo of social media platforms. I think there's a lot of things wrong with them. Shadow banning, all that stuff, I really dislike. However, if it is completely unregulated, what'll happen is that people will leave those platforms in droves, and we will no longer be connected the way we have been with each other. And that includes platforms like YouTube. Like if people can post any kind of crap on there that they want, it will completely undermine the legitimacy and credibility of everyone. Think of porn or spam or whatever. Like, it's crazy. Now, here's the thing. They're threatening that people will be able to sue these platforms. Individuals will be able to sue these platforms if they feel, and how do you prove this? If they feel that they have been censored. That is just crazy making. Now, the whole tech sector has been booming for years. And this, to me, could threaten the entire tech space of the internet. Because who wants to be in that position of liability, managing and hosting other people's content? It would just be crazy. So it could crush that whole industry. And Texas has even gone so far as to say that Facebook can't, for example, can't discriminate against Texans. So they couldn't just say, well, we're not going to allow our users to be in Texas anymore, because then Texas would go after them for discriminating against them. So they're in an impossible situation. Either they completely, have no controls over the content whatsoever and users, or they shut down, because the liabilities could potentially be enormous. It's a no-win situation for the tech platforms. And I'm including, YouTube, which is owned by Google, and all the other ones as well. This is like crazy shit, basically. And this is all driven by the fact that conservatives have felt like platforms have discriminated against them in the past. My argument is that, well, reality has a liberal bias, liberal in the small L of the word, because, we deal with facts and reality, and these people are dealing with weird and bizarre ideologies. So The implications of this are just like mind-boggling from my perspective. Where would we be if we went back decades and we weren't like, I mean, I'm doing it right now. I'm communicating with people I've never met before on a social media platform who allows me to put my content on there for free, and then, yeah, there's a few lucky people who have tons of users and they make some money off it and stuff like that. But most people are just sharing content. But if YouTube was full of crap, like just junk and garbage, like who would use it anymore? Nobody. Or if, people could threaten you or just, think about it. It's insane. And now I see this is a form of nihilism. They're losing. The right is losing. And so their strategy is basically to burn the place down. We're going to destroy everything. We're just going to go because they hate us. So we're just going to destroy everything. What they're not thinking about is all of the broader implications of this. So when you couple this with Roe v. Wade and all the other things that are occurring now, it's obvious. This is like an attack, and they're going to probably go after it in every conceivable way. They're going to try and burn the whole place down, basically. Now, at what point do people on the other side of the equation react to that and say, this is crazy. You just can't do this. You can't destroy everything. We're not going to let you do that. And then what happens? I don't know. I did that video on the USA Pluto Return Civil War transformation. And, I wasn't suggesting that Civil War was going to look like, people with rifles out shooting each other in fields, with cannons and stuff. But this to me looks very much like that's the direction we're headed, without the hand-to-hand combat necessarily. And, if they win, then you're looking at real darkness. You're looking at autocracy, fascism, people of color and who aren't white or whatever will be very much discriminated against, and women. And come on, this is nuts. Margaret Atwood just had a piece in the Atlantic today, which addressed this whole issue of Gilead and how this resembles that. And what they've done is I talked about this in the video I did on the Powell memo, they've been systemically and incrementally going in this direction for decades. And the left has been kind of asleep at the wheel. It drives me crazy. In fact, I shared a piece today by a writer in The Guardian talking about how the Democrats desperately need younger people involved in the leadership because the older people who are kind of in charge of the Democrats right now are clueless when it comes to this stuff. And here we are. That is what I wanted to draw your attention to. I really don't think people understand how dangerous and how significant this whole HB 20 thing is. It has the potential to completely change everything that we're familiar with and that has been so important to us. I mean, the ability for us to connect and discuss spiritual things, and strong chills here. This is ground changing, Where would we be without that? Like, what company is going to want to have a platform where anyone can engage and come on and say whatever the hell they want to say without repercussions or without any kind of control? It'll just basically shut down. Like, no one will want that liability of being sued for being accused of censoring somebody. It's crazy. I mean, that could even be, I don't know, say WordPress.com, where people have blogs, and then somebody writes something that they don't like and somebody wants to criticize it, and then they sue WordPress. Like, come on, this is free speech under attack. And just to be clear, free speech doesn't mean that you can say hateful, hurtful, or dangerous things to other people or attack them or whatever, or even necessarily spew lies that are harmful. That's not what free speech is. The state has a duty to protect people from harm. So there is a line there. So free speech doesn't just mean a free-for-all. That is anarchy. Good Lord. So, I have a feeling that there's more coming, that this is not it, that there's more. That's just, like, this stuff is so completely unhinged. It's just beyond comprehension. It would have been inconceivable. If I had said this stuff to somebody a few years ago, they just would have literally laughed at me. But it's such a gradual, incremental, relentless erosion and chipping away and undermining that, you kind of get used to that. It's insidious. And that's what we have to watch out for. So I think it's very important for us to be aware and paying attention and considering these things, but also doing everything we can to ground more light in here, because that is what is triggering these people. And at some point, the light will just become overwhelming to the darkness. But at this point in the game, we cannot back off. Very important. Otherwise, we seem to be at this fork in the road, and we could go down an extremely dark path. I mean, you look at what's happening in other countries in the world right now. There's really this war between authoritarianism and democracy. And democracy is very much on its back foot right now because it doesn't really know how to respond to these people who have completely different ethics and code of conduct than we do. We have to wake up and take our heads out of the sand. And anybody who thinks that this stuff isn't serious, they're almost delusional. So, don't be lulled into a false sense of complacency. If we let them take an inch, they will take a mile. Middle Eastern dictators were terrified by the Arab Spring. And a big part of that was social media platforms, which allowed people to communicate about their whereabouts and activities and protests and things like that. So I wouldn't put it past these people that this is somehow a backhanded, deliberate ploy to disconnect people and to bring down the internet, because it is a threat to their hegemony or their power. One sure way to quell an uprising is to cut off their communications and isolate them. Finally, I want to add that, in my opinion, strong energy here, anybody whose belief system, religion, or philosophy, or ideology requires them to deny objectifiable reality, there is something wrong with them, and there is something wrong with their belief system. My spirituality does not require me to deny any aspect of my reality unless I choose to do so. So we're talking about cultish behavior here. It's really bizarre from my perspective. In fact, here in Canada, where I am, the only time abortion ever comes up as an issue is when somebody on the far right fringe of the Conservative Party brings it up, and then everybody goes like, oh my God. You can't even bring that up politically here. It's almost like a form of political suicide, because Canadians will simply not entertain the notion of outlawing abortion access. And we never, I can't even think of religion and politics just never really mix. There is a fringe, but it's not a subject that is even, it's extremely rarely debated or discussed even here in Canada. I don't even understand why religion is such a big thing in the US, to be honest with you. In most of the other developed countries, it's just a non-issue. It's a personal thing. If you want to go to church, great. Nobody tries to shove it down your throat. It's not mandatory. It's quite bizarre, actually. That's one thing about America that stands out, and Americans may not realize this, but it's extremely, from an outside perspective, it's extremely odd. I'm not talking about spirituality. I'm talking about religion, organized religion. Very strange. As far as I'm concerned, fundamentalist religious people, in many cases, have been co-opted by and are basically useful idiots for plutocrats and power brokers. And I just don't get it. That's probably going to offend some people, but that is my honest perspective. Go travel in Europe or go visit Canada or something. It's like we live in different centuries in that regard. I'm not saying Canada's better. I'm just saying that in that respect, like the whole social conservatism thing, basically these people want to create a theocratic state. Just incredible in this day and age that is even a remote possibility. I mean, these are the sorts of people who burnt innocent people alive on the flimsiest of evidence in the past. It wasn't even evidence, it was speculation or conjecture or outright fabrication, aka lies. Lying is the antithesis of spirituality. Religion and politics should be completely separate. Completely. It's so tribalistic, there are hundreds, thousands of different religions. Why is any one better than another? It's really very bizarre to me. Oh, one more thing. This is very important. I recently had to start doing very powerful protection and clearing techniques or rituals, which I haven't had to do in years. And they have worked after a few days. If you're feeling off in ways that don't make sense, I have published some of those here, the ones that I'm allowed to. And it's something you might want to consider. That's all I want to say for now. I'm already way longer than I thought I would be because I don't have a lot of time to edit this and stuff. So the quality of this audio may not be the best, but I really felt like I needed to get this out there. It's like urgent, really. Good God. Anyway, appreciate your thoughts and feedback, and hopefully I'll be on here more frequently and more regularly going forward. God, do your prayers, your meditations, your blessings. Open yourself up to be a vehicle for light and energy to come in and help heal Gaia and lift this planet out of its current state and onto a better future. Bye for now.